Welcome, Bethany, back again for your second time on the Dental Hygiene Basics podcast. And as always, so excited to have you here and to be talking to you. And we're talking about something different today. Last time we talked all about your RDH origin story and your experiences through dental hygiene school. So I'll definitely plug that episode. Everyone go back and listen because it's a great episode. But today we're really focusing on an amazing new project that has been out and about for a while now, but it's the Oral Health Awareness Project. And you are on the board and you are so kind to be here and share more about that project. So go ahead and tell us a little bit. What is the goal behind the Oral Health Awareness Project?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dana. This is kind of a new, exciting thing that just really came together within maybe the past 3 or 4 months. So, long story short, we just started to notice that almost every single state is encountering legislative threats for the future of the dental hygiene profession. There are many states that have already attempted to pass bills and laws that would allow lesser trained individuals to provide traditionally dental hygiene services and practice. And then some states have actually been successful in passing these things into law. And we are trying to do everything that we can as a profession to counteract that. But what we really started to realize is that the public is our biggest ally in this whole thing. The public could really be working with us on the legislative side, but the big issue is the majority of the public don't really know what a dental hygienist is. They don't really know what we do. And I think that probably any hygienist, or even like the students watching this could probably vouch for that. If you talk with your everyday patient, a lot of them will ask like, so how long did you have to train here at this office to be able to do what you do? Or, when are you going to become a dentist? Like how much longer of this do you have to do before you can become a dentist? And they just don't really understand the depth of our education. They don't really understand the entire scope of our practice. They mainly associate us with cleaning teeth. And we know that we are trained and educated to do so much more than that. And so the way that the Oral Health Awareness Project came together is we saw this great need for educating the public on the value of having a college educated degree holding registered dental hygienist providing their preventive care. It really can't be substituted by an individual that maybe took like a crash course over the weekend to do a simple prophy. And it definitely can't be done by a person that maybe did some on the job training like some of these states are fighting to get passed. So we came together as a group, I want to say in May or June, and we just immediately started fundraising as an organization with the goal of hiring a public relations firm that could really help us to strategically go about a public service announcement campaign to really touch base with the public and to achieve our end goal. So I think it took us maybe 7 or 8 weeks to complete our fundraising so that we could hire our PR firm. Our PR firm's called Matter, and they've worked with some other dental organizations in the past and have been really, really successful. And so we hired them on in the end of July. And so we've been working with them ever since. And it's been such a worthwhile project. Our biggest goal to start off is educating our own industry, because I would say even a lot of allied professions within the industry, they don't really know the extent of the education and the capabilities of a hygienist. And I think that's part of why nobody is really speaking up against the legislative stuff that potentially can threaten the future of the hygienist. People within our own industry think, oh, they just have an associate's degree and all they do is clean teeth. Like all they do is prophy. So what's the big deal? So our initial effort has been put into educating our own industry on how important it is to keep our educational standards high for the dental hygiene profession and to work against creating these kind of backdoor options for lesser trained individuals to provide hygiene services. And then now that we've been focusing on that for a few months, our greater goal is the public. So we're positioning a lot of our social media efforts to the public. We've also been working to connect with local and national news outlets, popular publications that people read, and the goal is to educate them on the value of maintaining educational standards and how potentially lowering those standards could negatively impact the oral health care that people are receiving. So it's been quite the journey, but it's been exciting to watch it unfold so far.
Yeah, and I love it. As soon as I saw it show up, I didn't even know you were on the board. I had no idea what was going on. I just saw it show up on my socials, and I think you know me. I'm all about hygienists supporting hygienists, and I just think there's no wrong way to get involved. If you have a group of people who are passionate about the field of dental hygiene and they want to advance it and they want to do something to improve it, I'm like, let's do it. Where do I sign? Where does I'm? But I think it's so true what you said. I even just think about me before I was a hygienist. I was an assistant and thinking through what dental hygiene school would be like, I had no idea. I did not know the level of education that I was going to receive. And really, I think my professors instilled in me just how important our job is and our role is, right? It is more than just a cleaning. I remember my first class, my professor, Professor Smiley, made us read an article and write, I don't know, some type of article essay, after you read it, but it was on not just the cleaning lady. That's not
Mhm.
really, that is an important part of our job, but everything that comes before and after that, really, that's just the
Right.
middle of the sandwich, right? If you don't have the bread on either side, you don't get the full
Exactly.
comprehensive care. And we see sometimes on socials people, dentists, dental assistants saying anyone can do your job, right? We can train anyone to scale. And I really just think that, like you said, we have to maintain those educational standards. My thought is brains before scalers, right? You have to know why you're doing what you're doing in order to be doing it
Yeah.
successfully and correctly. So, with that being said, tell me a little bit more because you said you started your campaign with getting more information to allied professionals, which I love because I actually randomly, I don't know how this happened, but my husband and I were having dinner the other night and we end up talking to the couple next to us and they're in their like 60s or 70s and we're like, we're going to go have a drink around the corner. Like, do you want to come with us? And they
Oh,
came
that's
with
so
us. It was
nice.
fun. And she was a registered nurse. She was an ER
Okay.
nurse for years and years and years. And so then she's asking what I do and all of that. And I tell her, I was like, yeah, I work in education and I, grade the clinical exam and all that. She's like, tell me more about that. I was like, well, our students have to take a written board exam. They have to do a clinical board exam. And then in most states, they also have to do another written board exam. It's like, it's a lot to become a licensed registered dental hygienist, not only including all of the education that goes into it. And she's like, I knew you were licensed, but I didn't really know what went into it. I did not have any idea. So, how did you guys go about spreading that message?
Well, I think that one of the most important angles that we've wanted to come from the very beginning is like even within our own industry, we want to make sure that people know that this is not an anti-dentist campaign. This is not an anti-assistant campaign. I've kind of heard that over time where like some people have said, well, I'm nervous to support this initiative because I really respect dentists. I don't want to do anything that might come against them. And that is not the goal at all, not even in the slightest. We believe in the value of all professions within, the dental healthcare model. What we really want is to be able to work collaboratively alongside dentists so that we can provide the very best care to our patients as we can. On the assistant side, I think a common misconception with the work that we've been doing is that maybe that we believe that assistants aren't smart enough or capable enough to provide basic dental hygiene services. And I know since you just mentioned that you were previously an assistant, you could speak to this. It's not a question of assistants not being smart enough because we know that they are. I would say like the vast majority of registered dental hygienists out there were previously assistants. So it's not the intelligence, it's just the formal education and the training that an assistant or anybody providing these hygiene services would be lacking. So that's another thing that we've just really wanted to make sure that people understand. We've also wanted to make sure that people understand that we want to work collaboratively with other associations and groups within the industry. That's really what this whole thing is about, is to come together as professionals, um, for the good of the healthcare of our patients. So that's really been like the big goal, and where our heart is in working toward fulfilling these goals that we have. And then, kind of facing toward the public, what we're really trying to do is educate the public on how important it is to be receiving their oral health care from a properly educated and accredited professional. And you probably could speak to this too, Dana, but I think that if we look at our industry holistically, there are so many different things that have come into play over the past several years that have brought us to where we are today with the state of the dental hygiene profession, right? I think that the COVID pandemic had a really strong impact on all this stuff, because what happened during the pandemic is we experienced kind of this mass exodus of hygienists from the field. Now, the research does show us that the majority of those hygienists who left the industry ended up returning somewhere within the next 12 months. But during that time, we also did see kind of a major shift from hygienists working in full-time permanent capacities in a practice to temping. We also saw a lot of hygienists who decided that they wanted to advocate for increased salaries because they felt like they weren't getting compensated enough to compete with today's cost of living. And so I think that what happened is a lot of practices saw and experienced this, and they started thinking, well, if we can't keep a hygienist in the office or we can't afford to keep one, then we're just going to have to find another way. I think that ultimately some big changes that would need to happen to preserve the hygiene profession, as well as the education and training behind it, would be educating the public so that we can confront the third-party payer system within our industry. So some people might associate that or call it the dental insurance industry. I have a hard time calling it insurance because it's really not insurance. It's more like a discount. But that would be a huge goal for us with the work that we're doing, is we want to educate the general public on the reality of the reimbursement rates that the everyday practice is getting paid from these benefit plans, educate them on the fact that these reimbursement rates really haven't been increased in decades most of the time. And so that is ultimately what makes it hard for an in-network practice to support a hygienist, because as the reimbursement rates haven't been changing, the cost of living and the cost of doing business have drastically increased over the past 20 or 30 years. And so there's this big imbalance. And I think that we've done as much as we've been able to do to petition these companies to raise their reimbursement rates so that practices can be paid fairly. And that's not being received with an open ear. But ultimately, these companies will listen to their patient subscribers. And when the patient subscriber starts asking, why aren't you offering more benefits for my preventive care? Why is the practice having to write off so much? Or, in out of network situations, why am I having to pay so much for the preventive care that I'm receiving when I should be able to rely on my insurance to cover those expenses? So that's a big goal for us. And then another goal that we have is, by educating the public on what's going on, want to have their backing when it comes to legislation. When the public starts getting concerned about things, that's when legislators really start listening. Yes, they will listen to professional associations, they will listen to advocacy groups, absolutely. But their biggest ear is going to be to the public, what the public is saying, what the public is concerned about. And so by educating them on what's going on within the industry and how that can have some really negative ramifications on the public's overall health and wellness. We think that that's really going to help us to achieve the change that we really need within our industry so that practices can really grow and thrive and we can continue preserving the dental hygiene role within the practice, which is so valuable. It is so much more than cleaning teeth. Like even on my social media platform, like I've talked a lot about, the actual cleaning part is for me anyways, in a 60-minute appointment, that really only accounts for 20 minutes of what I do, and the other 40 minutes, a lot of that is my assessments with my patients and patient education, but it's hard to do all that stuff when you're working in a practice environment where you don't even have 60 minutes. A lot of times you're going to run into that with a practice that is in network with dental insurance because they can't afford to provide a hygienist with 60 minutes. And so it really does get reduced down to the cleaning. And so it kind of perpetuates so those are like the big bears that we're kind of up against and what we're really hoping to make some really good traction with as a group.
Yeah, it's so important. You mentioned coming from the patient facing side. We have to have that drive from our patients to push that change forward. We see that even with just, now there's more fluoride free options and there's different products on the
Mhm.
market because patients were looking for something specific. And now it's time for patients to say, what is this insurance even really doing for me? I always felt the same. Like, dental insurance doesn't really do that much for you, and unfortunately, it's hard to change people's mindset on that too, because I've had conversations like that. I'm like, you don't need it, I know it's not fun to save up and pay out of pocket, but really, when you think about the big picture and cash discounts that you can get, I don't have dental insurance. I pay cash when I go and I ask for the cash discount. And
Right.
so it's really tough sometimes to get people to break away from that insurance. It feels like a safety net. That may be true for medical insurance, but that is not the case for dental insurance in most cases. I'm not saying in all, because I'm not, super well versed with insurance, but that's an important conversation to have. So thinking through how is this stuff being released into the wild? Like how is the PR firm putting this information out there? Because I know we have social media, but I see what you guys are posting, but is there something happening behind the scenes beyond that?
I would say a big part of our strategic approach is through social media, just kind of the way that our society has evolved. Social media has become, for many people, the primary way that they receive their information. And so that is a really, really important pillar of our communication approach with the public. But some other ways that we are constantly exploring and pursuing are like those news outlets, local and national news, and the publications that people tend to look to for their news. And so I know that probably at the time that this podcast airs, this is going to be more past tense, but on October 25th, our organization has planned a peaceful demonstration in Washington, D.C. That's going to be another way for us to raise awareness and to touch base with the public. But during this demonstration, we have hygienists that are gathering from all across the country to stand and hold signs talking about the fact that dental hygienists save lives. And degree holding, college educated dental hygienists, they make a difference. So I'm really, really excited to see what the outcome is from our peaceful demonstration. But things like that, we're constantly planning public events. I'm not sure what we have on the pike for down the pike for upcoming events, but that is kind of our biggest one that people can be watching out for. So those are the main things that we've been looking at in terms of connecting with the public.
I love that. And thinking through how someone, a student or a current hygienist, or even an aspiring hygienist, if you're listening to this, you're like, I want to protect my future profession, thinking of ways that you can start sharing that on your own now. I'm thinking, obviously follow Oral Health Awareness Project on socials, share your social media, repost it. But also educate your patients, educate your friends and family. Maybe if there's a health fair, show up, right? If there's career fairs, educating the public on what we do and getting more people who want to be a part of this profession. Those are some things I can think of. Is there anything else you can think of?
Gosh, I feel like advocacy has so many different faces. And I wouldn't say that there's like a right or wrong way to do it, but I mean, it can be getting involved in a group like ours. It can be getting involved in your national association, but it can also be just the way that you show up to work every day, like deciding for yourself each and every morning that you want to be the hygienist that you were educated to be when you were in school and you graduated, having that same fire and prioritizing like those assessments that, the AdPIDE stuff that we learn in school. For many hygienists, as soon as they graduate from their program and they get their license and they enter the workforce, a lot of that stuff kind of gets pushed off to the side. The assessments go away, the patient education goes away. And I would say, that's played a part in us, being in at the point that we are at as a profession today. So even if you don't necessarily feel called to advocate with a specific group or in a super public way, advocating for your profession in the quality of your patient care is such a great way. And having those conversations with your patient about the extent of your education and what you had to do to become licensed, those are important conversations to have. And I'll be honest, for me personally, Dana, I never ever saw myself doing any advocacy work. I never felt like a passion for it. I never necessarily felt called to it, but I've been practicing as a hygienist for about 13 years. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I started to see and really realize a lot of the misunderstandings and kind of the injustices that happen within our industry and a lot of things that are kind of messed up for our profession. And the more that I started seeing that and I started learning about it, the more that I really started to develop a heart for this stuff and I wanted to become more involved. And so I would say that would be another part of advocacy or just being a good professional is staying up to date on the things that are happening not only in your state but in the country. You can get a lot of that news through your professional association. You can also get a lot of that news by following different accounts on social media. There are just many ways to learn, but the more that you can stay informed as a professional, the more that you can advocate or kind of choose the way that you want to advocate.
That's so true. Something that you said that's kind of stuck with me is, it starts with you. Not even the having to be president of your association or, donating all the money or whatever it is. When I say it starts with you, it starts with you and your operatory, just like you said. And, if we think about how excited we were to get into dental hygiene school and to get that degree, and then we get out and you're right, it's some things go by the wayside, things fizzle, you're dealing with the insurance or lack of pay or benefits, all the things. And it's easy to get run down, but when you start to find that joy in your career, which no one's going to create it for you. You have to find that own joy, right? And maybe that means switching to another office or trying something completely different, like you and I, we do weird stuff within the field of dental
Yeah.
hygiene, right? Like we're not your traditional hygienist, but I think that's when we both probably found the passion because I would say I'm the same as you. I was involved when I was a student and I've gone to meetings here and there, with the association. I'm a member and all of that, but I always kind of felt guilty, like I'm not doing enough, but it just wasn't where my passion was at the time, right? At the time it was okay, I'll be a paying member and maybe the money is enough for now, but you don't have to have that guilt on your shoulder because like you said, advocacy looks different for everyone. It could be the conversation that you have with your patient, educating them on you and your education, right? But it may also look like I'm just a member, or it may be like I'm the president, whatever it is, it's okay. Or maybe all you're doing is reposting oral health awareness projects. But,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways to just show your support. But I think it comes down to being proud and happy of your profession. And that's can be really hard to do if you're not in a happy place in your career. At least
Yes.
that's how I feel. I was kind of separated for a while because I was really unhappy in my career. But now that you know, and I had to recognize that within myself. And once I made that change, things started to look a lot different.
Right. Well, and happiness, man, I've just come to learn the older that I've gotten that that's something that we have to create like every day. Like happiness and fulfillment, they're not things that you're just going to stumble upon. in like the right opportunity or around the right people, that's a decision that you have to make every day. Like, what makes me happy and what do I need to do to continue feeling happy and fulfilled? And so just like you said, sometimes that means making really hard decisions. Sometimes that means deciding for yourself, I'm really not in an environment where I feel respected, or I'm not in an environment where I'm in a position to grow, and I'm not in a position where I feel like I have the freedom to practice at the top of my scope. I would say that a lot of hygienists feel, they feel like they're in that position to some degree, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people, not just hygienists, but a lot of people find themselves in a situation like that, and instead of maybe doing some of that reflection and making some hard decisions, they just choose to stay because it's familiar and it's secure, and they go through their entire career just never really feeling happy and never really feeling passionate, when really all it might have taken for them to find that happiness and passion would have been to change their environment. I can't remember where it was that I read it the other day, but it said when you have a flower or a tree and it's not growing, you don't change the flower, you change the environment. You put it in a different place, you provide it with more sunshine, you give it more water. Just because you're not happy doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, but it potentially could mean that you need a change of environment so that you can truly thrive. And so that's something that I would really, really encourage people to give some deep thought to really think about, like, am I happy? And if so, like, what are the things in my environment that are contributing to my happiness? But on the flip side, if you were to ask yourself that question and you would tell yourself, I'm not really happy. Like, I don't wake up in the morning like excited to go to work. I dread being there every day. And as soon as I get there, I'm just counting down the hours and the minutes until the workday's done so I can go home. If that's the case, what are the things that are contributing to those feelings, and what would need to change for you to get out of that space? So, if you can do that much for yourself, that's advocating for yourself, right? If you can advocate for yourself and provide yourself with that much self-love, then you'll be in a position to where you'll want to advocate outside of yourself. You'll want to advocate for your hygiene team at your practice. You'll want to advocate for your patients. You'll want to advocate for your profession. So, a lot of that stuff is going to start within. But once you do that inner work, there's some really amazing things that will happen. You will have a whole new outlook on your career, outlook on life. You'll have this whole new confidence because you're showing up to work every day with purpose, and that's really powerful stuff. So if there's any message that maybe we could kind of like end this with, or people could walk away with, that would be like the starting point for all of this stuff, is to just really get clear on what it would take for you to feel happy in your career and what would need to change. And for me, I feel like I've put such a focus on that for myself over the past 3 or 4 years. I feel like I'm in a place where I'm very happy in my work environment, but it's also made me very aware of what's going on all around me in my industry. And I want not just for me to feel happy, I want for all of my colleagues to find that same sense of fulfillment and purpose within their career. And I know that advocacy plays such a huge part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's leave it better than you found it is how I kind of think. But the last thing I think I would want to say is it's a ripple effect. You adjust, you start making small changes that make you happier, and that spreads out to your community, not only to your patients who you're taking better care of, also to your family, but to, the people that we work with, making their lives better too. And we start to see suddenly by changing us, it starts to create a shift. Now, not to say that happens miraculously all the time, like you said, sometimes you have to change the environment and find that opportunity to make the shift within yourself. But I think it all starts, like you said, just with us. So, really amazing advice. Okay, so tell us all where we can find information about the Oral Health Awareness Project if we have it.
Yes. So we have accounts on Instagram and Facebook, and the handle is Oral Health Awareness Project, just written out in long form. We also do have a private Facebook group by the same name, and it is exclusively for hygienists who want to support this cause. It's a really great community. And then we also have our website, so it's oralhealthawarenessproject.org, and that would be for anyone who wants to become a paying member of our organization. And by becoming a paying member, um, your dues go directly to our PR campaign. They go directly to the efforts that we're making to connect with the public. There's not a single person on our team that's getting paid for this stuff. It's all volunteer work that we're doing because we are so passionate about the mission. And I do want to backtrack just like a tiny bit. I don't want to keep us too much longer, but I know that you mentioned like when we were talking about like talking to patients about like fluoride and how, that conversation has changed so much. And I want to use that as an example to communicate how important or how powerful public opinion is. So if we think about this with fluoride, for the longest time, it was so rare that you would ever have a patient on your schedule that would say, like, I don't want fluoride today. I'm worried about it. I felt like for me, that was a pretty rare occurrence. But over the past few years, we've seen a big shift where there's a great public concern. There's a lot of chatter and conversation about fluoride, and the public has become so concerned and so aware that it has changed legislation in a lot of local communities to where communities and some states are actually removing fluoride from the public water system. So, regardless of what your opinion is on that, I use that example to say what the public thinks matters. And when the public starts speaking up and saying, I don't want that for myself, or I don't want that for my family, I want something else instead, that is when not only legislators, but companies start listening too. If you look around at the product offerings that your office has now, a lot of manufacturers make fluoride free products now, fluoride free Profi paste. There's even fluoride-free varnishes and things like that. And it all comes down to the public. So I wanted to mention that before we finished up this conversation too on, how important it is to make sure that we're educating the public and that we're really including them on everything that's happening within our profession and within our future. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's such a great point to make. And you're exactly right, because we are seeing those changes occurring and it's coming from the patient, which is not a good thing and not a bad thing sometimes. I'm really excited about the project. I'm excited for legislation day or the demonstration in Washington, DC. So I know this will come out after, but we're just wishing all of the support and, lots of good vibes out there that this continues to spread the message of what we can and what we've always known that we're capable of doing. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Bethany, for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dana.